Just a few words today about the power of your undivided attention. If you're like me, if you're like a lot of folks, then certainly there were times where you were assigned tasks, given work, schoolwork, and otherwise, that really was so easy to do. Didn't require much of your bandwidth, that pretty easily on the side you could have music going on, have an audiobook going on, maybe have a show in the background, other kind of things like that. And it seems fine, but what happens, and this is not to say you should never do that, is when we start to recalibrate our sense of what we are capable of doing by what we can do with the amount of attention we'll spare for it. It's a little bit like the difference between what happens on our phone versus on our laptops and desktop computers, which is to say they're both internet-connected devices that can go to a lot of the same websites. However, you'll, on one, be more likely to just kind of scroll or view, on the other, more likely to write a longer message, do more editing, break things into paragraphs, things where you can tell that in order to handle a response correctly, I'm going to have to get up off my couch and go to my machine. The same thing happens with our attention. Yesterday's video, of course, was continuing that thread about doing the importance of one thing at a time, what a difference it can make for us. And the reason why I'm mentioning this today is that for a lot of folks, they get so kind of used to, especially when they're doing work for somebody else, right? Somebody else's task, somebody else's objective, part of somebody else's thing, getting used to doing that at the half bandwidth it requires from us. And that may be fine. Again, I'm not saying not to do that, but there's two reasons why it's worth reassessing that in your own time. One of those can be simply because it's limiting your sense of what you're capable of as to, well, you're yourself with kind of one hand behind your back, right? It's yourself with half your attention. It's yourself with part of yourself distracted. As for how long of a task will take on, as for how big of a chunk, as for how much complexity you can handle in your mental stack. Programmers especially, though this affects many other kinds of work, will refer to when they're taking on challenging problems, they kind of have to build up a whole mental model of what's going on, from having checked a few parts of the code together and kind of picturing the pieces. And the same is again true for many other kinds of craft, but it's something where that bandwidth, that RAM, is partly going to be tied up by what else you have going on. So it might even be a matter of, yeah, sure, background music's fine, but have you tried out different kinds of background music? There's types of music that I enjoy listening to that I've also figured out are terrible as background music. They just distract me, they're too high energy. It's like they're really built for stage performance, where you're in the crowd watching and the whole thing happening up there is your full attention. That's great, and that's valid, and that's wonderful music, but it's also something that maybe, A, doesn't pair well with other work, and so it might be, still listen to music, but different background music, but it might also be the opposite of realizing to appreciate that music more. And this is going to sound old-timey, like what my parents used to do, right? They would sit around with their, like, 45 records, and just have music playing, and just sit there and listen, and, like, that was the activity, because they didn't have phones to scroll on and stuff. It may be the same thing that also, again, this is the second side to it, just to genuinely get more time out of your show watching time, your game playing time, your phone scrolling time. And to be honest, this is me always working on this challenge too, trying to see if you can focus your attention on just one of those at a time. You may actually also find you're appreciating more, you're enjoying it more, following it better, and so on. It's also, again, partly reminding myself, I've caught myself doing this again lately. As much as I'm all focused on one thing at a time, I'm always working on this too. So it's a reconsideration, right, of the power of your undivided thought on what you're capable of doing, on if you've redefined your capacity, on when you always kind of let yourself be half distracted, something else still going on. If you've ever seen me on Twitter, I'm often poking about trying to encourage you to close your tabs, to, reduce the amount of things that you're simultaneously doing, close the programs you're not using, because I think we tend to, especially in digital space, start to spread out our attention on more things at once that are reminders to ourselves. It's like leaving clutter on your desk as a reminder of that thing, that letter I haven't gotten back to, right? The thing I haven't opened yet. And the problem with this is that it's a bit like when we are still doing these secondary things. We haven't really closed that tab. It's still tying up our mental RAM. It's still preventing us from giving our full undivided attention to something, which ultimately also means efficiency-wise, it can drag out. Had a roommate years ago who was great about this, where he would just very much zero in on something and would just knock it out. And I was sort of inspired by that and kind of took that on some of my same practice as to something that rather than, well, it could take 5 hours if he chooses to do it while half distracting himself. Instead, he would just be, bam, 30, 45 minutes, done. Knocked it out, total focus, no distractions, and then able to then fully enjoy the other remaining 4.5 hours or whatever. Pretty awesome. And again, just a reminder of, like, that's a choice that we make all the time when the time's up to us, and to maybe be a little just more conscientious of what those trade-offs are when they are on our own time, as opposed to, again, somebody else's, which at the end of the day, I mean, if somebody needs some stuff sorted or filed or whatever, and you got a soundtrack to do that too, by all means, embrace that. This is about, we're trying to push our limits, grow ourselves, test and challenge our skills, those kind of things. Often it can help to give our undivided attention to it. That's it for the day. I'll throw in one little micro plug. This is the last day for that self-command 75% off. And I think, I guess I'll put the link in the description one last time. But again, at this point, we're down to like the last, maybe I'll turn it off tomorrow morning. We'll see. Anyway, That's still open if you want to check that out for help on how I find it helps me to stay focused on one task at a time. Simple practice to use. And yeah, catch you tomorrow. Bye for now. Oh, speaking of which, it won't be self-command stuff tomorrow. It's going to be something different. I think you'll be excited to check it out. See you then.